There was a counterintelligence defensive briefing for the Trump campaign in mid-August 2016. These briefings are designed to warn the campaign of national security threats. And based on congressional letters, FBI text messages, and sources familiar with the matter, the Trump team was not specifically warned. The two campaign aides, retired General Michael Flynn and George Papadopoulos, were already under FBI investigation. That case was opened on July 31st, 2016 by FBI agent Peter Strzok, who was later removed from the special counsel team for sending the anti-Trump texts. Agent Strzok also coordinated the August 2016 defensive briefing. So Strzok was in a unique position. He was in charge of investigating Trump campaign members and warning the Trump campaign about Russia. Timing matters because days before the August briefing for the Trump team, Strzok and Page exchanged the controversial insurance policy texts, and they were also clearly anxious about the prospect candidate Trump could win. Writing on August 8, 2016, Page stated, "Trump's not ever going to be president, right? Right?" Strzok responded, "No, he's not. We'll stop it." This morning, House Republican John Radcliffe, who sits on the Judiciary Committee, responded to our reporting.
There was a defensive briefing of candidate Trump on August 17th of 2016, and I can tell you what he wasn't told. He wasn't warned about a Russia investigation that Peter Strzok had opened 18 days earlier. Why would Peter Strzok, who would participate at Jim Comey's direction in a defensive briefing designed to protect and warn a candidate, be the same person who is, in fact, at that time already investigating the candidate's campaign?
Congressman said that this issue is of special interest to the Attorney General William Barr, who's looking at the origins of the Russia investigation. Meantime, we're reaching out to participants at that August 2016 briefing for additional comment, and we will update, of course, if we get it. Sandra.
Catherine Herridge, thank you.
Former Attorney General Judge Michael Mukasey with us in studio. Nice to see you, Judge. Good morning.
To be here.
Well, this is clear as mud, would you say?
Well, that's one of the things I might say. Take a look at what he did and what he was appointed to do. He was appointed to look into whether there was a criminal relationship between the Trump campaign and the Russians. That's what he was appointed to do. And then to decide whether to charge anybody in connection with that or not. He charged Russians. He didn't charge any Americans in connection with that. And that obviously didn't find any connection. He was also responsible for deciding to prosecute or not prosecute related cases. And he prosecuted plenty of those. But they were all cases that arose after he took office and in connection with his investigation. For him to say that he couldn't absolve the president, couldn't find that he didn't commit a crime, was not his function.
The question is why. Watergate, Iran-Contra, Ken Starr, who was operating under different rules.
Precisely.
They all left behind conclusions or at least direction. Why no conclusions or definitive direction from Mueller in his team?
Well, you'd have to ask Mr. Mueller that. I think that it was pretty plain that the evidence didn't justify it, but he didn't want to say that. And so he said that he could not clearly find that he didn't commit a crime. That's not a prosecutor's job. You know, occasionally it happens. It's kind of an occupational hazard in Washington that somebody confronts a situation that he thinks is bigger than the rules that limit his function. And it seems that that's what happened here.
You said that's an occupational hazard?
Yeah, and there are a lot of big problems in Washington, and sometimes you come across a really big problem that you think is more important than the rules that limit your function. Jim Comey was not authorized to do what he did. He did it anyway because he was facing a big problem. Mueller wasn't authorized, Bob Mueller wasn't authorized to absolve or not absolve anybody. He was authorized to decide on prosecution, period.
When you hear the phrase insufficient evidence, how do you define that? Why is this so debatable in legal terms?
Well,
does it mean no evidence or not?
Well, it doesn't mean no evidence because he's suggesting that there was some evidence. And he listed in his report 10 what he referred to as obstructive acts. Set them out but didn't put them in context, didn't indicate, for example, that there was no underlying crime to obstruct. He stated that they were unsuccessful, but said they were unsuccessful only because other people intervened. But they were ultimately unsuccessful.
What happens next then? Just Take us through what you think.
That's obviously a political question that is going to be determined by Congress.
Yeah. Will Bob Mueller testify?
I have no idea. I think that I would like to see
He
him.
clearly does not want to, based on his comments yesterday.
One of the things that he seemed pretty intent on doing was saying that he wasn't going to testify, and that if he did testify, it would simply be a repetition of what he said at that
So others
news
are
conference and in his
suggesting
report.
that what he's done is put Democrats into a tighter box, forcing them to make a decision. What's your view on that?
That's obviously a political question that everybody has just the same views as just the same weight as my views. But clearly that's what's happened. There are a number of people getting on that train.
You were watching Catherine Herridge's reports. You had a little soundbite there from Bob Mueller, a little soundbite from Bill Barr. Last night in Special Report, they ran a side-by-side comparison of what these two men have said, essentially. I just want you to watch. It runs about a minute long, and then you can tell us what this means legally.
There was no evidence of the Trump campaign collusion with the Russian government's hacking.
There was insufficient evidence to charge a broader conspiracy.
The evidence developed by the special counsel is not sufficient to establish that the president committed an obstruction of justice offense.
If we had had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so. We did not, however, make a determination as to whether the president did commit a crime.
Special counsel Mueller stated 3 times to us in that meeting, in response to our questioning, that he emphatically was not saying that but for the OLC opinion, he would have found obstruction.
Under long-standing department policy, a president cannot be charged with a federal crime while he is in office. Charging the president with a crime was therefore not an option we could consider.
And all of that is already under dispute. Put that in English as to how we can understand the difference between what both men are describing.
Bill Barr is sticking within the law. If there is not sufficient evidence to charge somebody, then that person doesn't get charged, and that's the end of it. Then you don't say that a crime was probably committed, a crime may have been committed. You say that there will be no charges. That's what the Attorney General did. The special counsel, on the other hand, went out of his way to suggest that, well, maybe a crime was committed, but we couldn't find enough. Why was it your job to try to find enough?
The debate continues. Really appreciate your input today. Thank you. Judge Michael Mukasey, the former Attorney General. Thank you for being here.
President Trump there responding last hour to Robert Mueller's statement, which lit an impeachment frenzy on Capitol Hill. Democrats reacting all day yesterday and this morning. So what happens next? Congressman John Ratcliffe serves on the Judiciary and Intelligence Committees and joins us now. Great to have you this morning, Congressman. Thank you for your time.
Good morning, Smitty.
As a member, good morning. Hemmerl, appreciate that.
Right on.
As a member of the Judiciary Committee in the House, certainly you were watching every word that Robert Mueller said yesterday. What were your key takeaways?
Well, a couple things. I think the good news for every American is Bob Mueller finally put a stake in the heart of the collusion conspiracy narrative. I know a lot of folks focused on whether he said there was no evidence or insufficient evidence. As far as the prosecutor is concerned, it doesn't matter. There's either evidence sufficient to charge a crime or there isn't. You can't be a little bit pregnant. And Bob Mueller said there was no collusion or conspiracy, and so we can finally put that to rest. It's dead. On the issue of obstruction, very clearly he intimated that but for the OLC opinion, his team probably would have charged Donald Trump with obstruction crimes. That's good news for Democrats that are looking for a foothold to start impeachment proceedings. The bad news for Democrats is Bob Mueller is very clearly wrong on every level with regard to obstruction. But the biggest takeaway for me, Smitty, was what Bob Mueller said that just left me flabbergasted when he said that if we had confidence that President Trump did not clearly commit a crime, we would have said so. And in that moment, what Bob Mueller did, whether he intended to or not, was to turn American jurisprudence upside down, to take the standard of innocent until proven guilty and reverse it. He muddied up President Trump because he said that President Trump didn't prove he was innocent. And I don't know if that's what he wanted the last chapter of the book of his public service to be, but that's what he said, and that's a bad ending.
Well, let's go back to Robert Mueller's words yesterday on evidence. Listen.
The first volume of the report details numerous efforts emanating from Russia to influence the election. This volume includes a discussion of the Trump campaign's response to this activity, as well as our conclusion that there was insufficient evidence to charge a broader conspiracy.
He made very clear, Congressman, that he would not say anything there or in the future that was not already in the report. This is what the Mueller report says. It states the investigation did not identify evidence that any U.S. persons conspired or coordinated with the IRA. And, of course, that's the Internet Research Agency in Russia. So which is it?
Well, I think Bob Mueller, to his credit, did there exactly what he was supposed to do, which is write the definitive narrative on how Russia tried to interfere or meddle and whether or not the Trump campaign participated. And as he said, Russia clearly did meddle, but the Trump campaign clearly did not conspire or collude, and that's why he was not contemplating any charges, didn't charge a broader conspiracy. So that's what Bob Mueller was supposed to do. The rest of the stuff, 200 pages about potential charges for crimes that he didn't charge, that's exactly what he wasn't supposed to do.
But that's
exactly what a prosecutor
That's not stopping the
isn't
chairman
supposed
of
to
your
do.
committee, Jerry Nadler, from still accusing the president of lying. That was his reaction after, again, hearing from Robert Mueller yesterday. So, Congressman, what is next for your committee, the House Judiciary, chaired by Jerry Nadler? How does he proceed?
Well, let me just be real clear. Chairman Nadler's wrong. Donald Trump was the one telling the truth. When he said there was no collusion, yesterday, Bob Mueller said there was no collusion. So the only one that's not telling the truth right now about that is Jerry Nadler. But look, what Jerry Nadler and the Democrats are looking for is a justification, some foothold to start impeachment proceedings. Now, some of them didn't need that. 60 Democrats voted to impeach Donald Trump last year before they saw a word of the Mueller report. But they're looking for justification because they know in the court of public opinion, the American people are going to be looking at that. So, you know, I think Bob Mueller's comments and the way he delivered them yesterday gave the Democrats the foothold to at least have that discussion. But at the end of the day, Bob Mueller was wrong. He was wrong about the law on obstruction and the process on obstruction.
Will he subpoena Robert Mueller?
You know, I'm in the minority here, Smitty, but I hope so, because I don't think Bob Mueller should be allowed to literally take the money and run. I don't think he should be able to hold a press conference, make some veiled comments, and then walk away without answering questions.
Why did he do it?
What's not in his report?
Why did he do it?
Excuse me? I don't know. I don't know if maybe the president's right. Maybe he was upset that he got passed over for FBI director by President Trump. I don't know. All I do know is that he did what prosecutors are not supposed to do. He did what I didn't think he would do. He repeated the same mistake that Jim Comey made. Okay. And so I find that disappointing and regretful. But I have questions for Bob Mueller that he needs to answer.
Okay, so will there be, and I'm sorry for jumping in here because we're going to run out of time, but so many questions for you. Will there be, will you sit down with Robert Mueller behind closed doors? Will that eventually happen with your committee?
I hope so. And if the Democrats want to do that, I'll support that, because there are questions that Bob Mueller needs to answer that relate not just to the origins of the Trump-Russia investigation, which isn't in his report, but the origins of the obstruction investigation, which isn't in his report. He needs to answer questions about why people like Peter Strzok were on his team when he was warned not to have Peter Strzok on his team.
All right, I've got a final question here.
Do I want to talk to Bob Mueller? Absolutely, I do.
Okay. Final question on some new reporting. Fox News reporting. Catherine Herridge is on this about an August 2016 defensive briefing to the Trump campaign. She's putting this together through some congressional letters, among other things. I guess the big question here is, was there adequate warning about Russia's outreach to the campaign at that time, and that Michael Flynn and George Papadopoulos were already under FBI investigation? Can you answer that question for us?
I can, even though that relates to classified materials. I can't tell you what's in those materials, but I have seen them. But what is public and not classified is that there was a defensive briefing of candidate Trump on August 17th of 2016. And I can tell you what he wasn't told. He wasn't warned about a Russia investigation that Peter Strzok had opened 18 days earlier. And so the questions, there are a lot of questions there that go to the origins of that matter, and that's one of the reasons I'm excited that Bill Barr has said he's going to get to the bottom of questions like that.
Last question on investigating the investigators. You just heard the president tee off outside the White House. What about Peter Strzok? Why didn't Robert Mueller dig in there? James Comey, Clapper. What happens next with all of that? How do you plan to proceed?
Yeah, great questions, fair questions. Why would Peter Strzok, who would participate at Jim Comey's direction in a defensive briefing designed to protect and warn a candidate, be the same person who is, in fact, at that time already investigating the candidate's campaign? That shouldn't happen, and there should be answers to those questions. Bill Barr knows that. A lot of us know that, and that's why Bob Mueller should have to answer questions about that, as should Jim Comey and Peter Strzok. There has to be accountability at the end of the day, Smitty. People are going to have their faith and trust restored in our justice system, and right now it's visibly shaken, and for good reason. And I'm glad that Bill Barr is putting the resources necessary to get answers to those questions, and I'll certainly support him.
And we appreciate your time this morning. Congressman John Ratcliffe, thank you.